It's easier to numb yourself than taking really, let's say you work in a corporation that you hate, but the way that you manage yourself through that is that you go out drinking with your friends every day, right? Instead of quitting the job, instead of finding a different place to work where you would feel more fulfilled,
Right.
instead of
Right.
going home and like making a plan, like doing the hard work of figuring out why do I not like this job and what do I need to make a change and what do I need to change within myself to maybe even like the job that you're in, and sort of do all of that work to, yeah, become a better person, which is what we've been talking about throughout this entire episode.
Life is but a dream. Life is but a dream. Life is but a dream. Yeah.
Hello, you beautiful souls. Welcome to the Praise the Sun podcast, where I'm honored to have on my guest, Tor. Tor, how are you, my friend?
I'm feeling pretty good today, thank you. Over the weekend, I don't know, I had COVID like 2 weeks ago, and it was either like a post-COVID echo or I caught another bug because I wasn't feeling too well. But today I feel like my head is above water and I feel much, much better. My sleep has like returned because I don't know, when I'm not feeling well, like my sleep gets all out of whack basically. So today I've been back at the gym, back to work, and yeah, I feel really good and super grateful to be here with you and your audience.
Awesome. Yes. Thank you so much. It definitely seems to be a bug or something going around. I wasn't feeling too well myself, and I know some people have been getting over at that. So, but yeah, we're in high vibrations. We're feeling good
Mm.
today, and yeah, happy to have you on. So, for our audience who is not familiar with you and your work, can you explain to us how you had your spiritual awakening?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for asking. So, like Sage said, my name is Tor. I'm from Norway, and I've been living in London for 12 years, since 2012. And my spiritual journey has actually been with me my entire life. I was super lucky and super grateful for that. My grandmother was actually a clairvoyant medium back home in Norway. So she was the first one to introduce me to tarot cards, to crystals, to meditation. And that's really where my sort of beginning with spirituality started. And I had quite a chaotic childhood in many ways with loads of turbulence. And I think that, her guidance at that early age helped me to, I suppose, look at those challenges with a perspective of learning over like victimization, victimhood, and that's sort of grown as I've matured and aged and my spiritual practice has developed. It's like I can sort of remember, I'm sure that memory is a bit off, but I can sort of remember the first time my grandmother guided me through a meditation where I got to meet my first spirit guide and just having a feeling of connecting with an energy force outside of myself, which didn't have a physical body, and just the strength and sense of connection and belonging that came from that. And I know that when I was younger, often when I was going through a difficult time, I leaned on that force and I leaned on that energy. And I think that often gave me like the resilience and the fortitude to keep on going. Obviously, during adolescence, like drinking and partying took sort of the forefront, and I didn't lose my spiritual practice, but it at least took much less of a priority in my sort of teenage years. And then I moved to London in 2012, and in 2013, again, I was going through quite a difficult time. And funnily enough, I visited my grandmother that Christmas, and I think I must have looked like a mess in many ways. And she sort of leaned in, as grandmothers do, and she sort of said, Tor, whatever you are doing, this needs to stop, this needs to change, and you need to find a group or a teacher or someone that you can work with in London. And luckily, I was living with someone at the time who knew someone, and I joined a psychic development circle here in London. And I've been working with my teacher who runs that group ever since, Ines Nicholson, which has been such a strong force in my life of leading me through meditation, of guiding me towards meeting my main spirit guide and all the others, and also work through and visit loads of past lives and healing perhaps some of the ways in which that they are impacting my life today, but also again just bolstering me to have a great sense of inner strength through my spiritual practice. And how do I work with this today, and how do I see clients, and so on and so forth. So at the moment, I see clients in three primary ways. So I see them through one-to-one psychic tarot readings, and I actually use my grandmother's tarot decks. There's loads of nostalgic value added to that. And then I also see clients for one-to-one energy healing, where I use meditation and breath work and crystals. And I also use sound energy healing through singing and through the voice. So instead of using like bowls and gongs, I chant. I do a chant-like type of singing. I call it resonant singing, because I think obviously chanting comes with a particular heritage, and that's not necessarily what I've been trained in. And then I see clients in a slightly different way, where I do spiritual coaching with them. And those kinds of clients are quite varied. Some people are going through a difficult challenge in life, like they're navigating a situation, and I hold that space for them to figure out how to navigate that for themselves in the best possible way. And then I also help people to grow spiritually. So, like, let's say somebody is at the beginning of their spiritual journey, and they need some guidance on how to start that and how to foster that and how to safely engage with that, because there's a lot of young people today who are starting out on their spiritual journey, which is amazing. A lot more people are awakening to the forces that be. But I think also at the beginning, if you don't have someone to support you, that can be quite destabilizing, because you don't know what's true or what's not true, or what sort of resonates. I suppose what's true is up to the individual. But yeah, it's about really supporting people on their journey. And I do that in three different ways, depending on the needs of the clients in many ways.
Beautifully said. What are the commonalities in which people often are struggling with, the people that you're working with?
Really, really, really good question. What are some of the commonalities that people are struggling with? Well, as a sort of basic foundational need, I think, is that I think a lot of people have simply lost the capacity to trust themselves. And I also think that a lot of people are afraid of the uncertainty of the future. Like, what's going to happen next? Is this going to be successful? Am I going to meet the partner of my life? Am I going to be loved? And I think, obviously, we all sort of, I suppose, worry about things, want these things in our lives. But the thing is, at the end of the day, we don't really know the cards that we have been given this time around in our journey. And I always try to guide people towards a sense of, like, I mean, and this is going to sound potentially quite spiritually trite, in the sense that I always try to guide people towards sort of fostering and cultivating a deep inner sense of acceptance and presence, and just being where they are now and making positive choices for their life today, and then allow their lives to unfold from that place, right? It's about making positive, good choices today. And then whatever the outcome will be, the outcome will be. Obviously, it's really hard when situations and outcomes doesn't go your way. Like, so for example, on the weekend, I was told a story about someone which was utterly awful. And I thought to myself, wow, that is a very, very, very difficult lesson to go through. And I felt a lot of sadness for them, and just holding the space for that person to tell that story and how that had affected themselves, because they were also going through a situation where their passion project is to do lots of good in the world, isn't necessarily going emotional, psychological energy invested into that. It's quite difficult for oneself to navigate that it's not going the way that we expected it to. And I think that, and I've been thinking a lot about it since the weekend, is that what we really, 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 really need to do is to cultivate some sense of a spiritual philosophy. It could even be an atheist philosophy, that we accept our lives for what it is. And if something doesn't go our way, we have to at least do our best to try to turn to a place where we understand that for one reason or another, that just wasn't for me, right? And that's not a bad thing. It just means in that moment, we have to pivot. We have to try something else. Perhaps the idea won't be exactly the way that we imagined it to, but we can get 7 out of 10, 5 out of 10, which is better than none at all. So it's really about cultivating that mindset of not being disappointed when something doesn't go our way, and then also being curious and open to pivot in that moment. So just going back to your question, like, what is the commonality? The commonality is that a lot of people don't have the tools and the practices and the inner strength to deal with the many challenges of modern life, which could be losing a job, a partnership coming to an end, like a romantic partnership, that your finances aren't going the way that you would like it to. So then it's really about helping them, creating a set of practices which helps them to be more grounded in themselves. And when they become more grounded in themselves, they then become better at creating creative solutions to their problems.
Yes, the troubles of life. The
Mm,
troubles of life. I I've been. Are you familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza?
I am, yes.
Yeah, I've been listening to a lot of his work recently. I've been listening to him for many years, but I've actually been like really thoroughly like taking notes and stuff. And what I found most interesting is that the most significant healing properties for people who have maybe like very bad prognoses, I think that's the word. Like for him, he had his spine crushed and his vertebrae shattered, and he was researching how people had spontaneous remissions. And the main factor between these people who had spontaneous remissions is that they had found a way to mitigate stress in the body.
Mm,
And stress was like the main thing that was keeping them stagnant and stuck in that same personality that they was creating every single day. And as he say, your personality is your personal reality. So if you want to experience healing, your personality needs to change. So
hmm
the thing that was holding them back was that for some people they were kind of stuck on these negative emotions.
mm,
Sometimes cancer manifests in people because they have too much like hate and jealousy and resentment built up inside of them. And the key that you're looking for that healing is just simply to release the emotion, to let go, to forgive. And through that
mm,
forgiveness you create a new personality, which creates a new personal reality. So
hmm
that's always most fascinating to me, that a lot of the things that cause us to be sick and ill, they're related to stress. So
hmm
stress management is so significantly important, and our life that we live currently is just very stressful. At every turn there's something that's happening that's just so stressful. So, you know, practices like meditation are key to mitigate stress, to create that personality that knows how to deal with these factors that come into your life. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, there's two really good books which talks about the mind-body connection, and I mean they're probably less spiritual than Joe Dispenza in many ways, but still quite spiritual in their ways. And there's a really good book which is called "When the Body Keeps the Score," which talks about actually a lot of PTSD from war and also just people in general and the ways in which that these kind of experiences manifests in the body, and if you are able to release that trauma energy, then you will feel better. There's another book which is also called When the Body Says No, which also speaks to that. And yeah, I think, you know, it is a funny one, stress, because it is a funny one because it's like in a modern life, right? We have to earn money. We have to earn money to pay our bills. That's simply how it's all set up. And so many of the ways in which that we earn money is stressful. And I think you were also talking to something there, which is social conditioning, right? Social conditioned behavior, which speaks to at least a lot of people my age who used to be my friends and have become less friends. They are still situated in that way of being where, you work your 9 to 6 job, and then you go out and socialize with your friends after work like 5 days a week, and then on the weekend you go out drinking, and you're always like doing, 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 doing. And then in all of that, a lot of them are also trying to exercise, and there's other expectations and other pressures, and all of that together, especially with sort of like a quote unquote normal 9 to 5 job pressed into that, creates a lot of stress. People do say that there is good stress and there's bad stress, and I think that's absolutely true. Like, I think sometimes, stress can help us to act, it can help us to pursue, but it's the problem happens when it becomes chronic, right? And I obviously strongly believe I practice meditation and breath work twice a day. I do energy work twice a day on myself to release a lot of stress. And I certainly do believe that through those practices, we can release a lot of the stress which creates bad symptoms in our body. But beyond that, we also have to create a certain type of lifestyle which mitigates stress, which is about slowing down, which is about that we don't always have to be like doing, experiencing. And, as I suppose it comes to no surprise that I am someone who advocates for sort of just sitting with yourself, right? Sitting with yourself with ease and with being, and sort of exploring your inner landscape and what happens in that space. And that can be really, really quite interesting, probably more interesting than having some sort of menial conversation with a friend around a dinner table, a conversation which really does nothing. And I think that if there's like an identity shift, a personality shift, is to shift away from that always outwards, always on, to start shifting inwards. And I think through starting that shift towards inwards, we can then, yeah, we can release and let go. It's like I used to have this part-time corporate job, and I had this person who worked there, and she was like, "Oh, Tor, if I had your lifestyle, I would be so bored," because they were someone who always had to be entertained, always have to be stimulated, stuff happening every day. And I was like, "But you're not a very nice person. Like, you never take time to release stress." And so I have come to a place where I really enjoy my slow leisurely lifestyle, where I do a couple of things but with great depth. And I think that's the shift that we have to step away from. And I mean, it's like, we were talking a bit about men just before we came online. I don't know what it's like in America, but in England at least, after work, what you do is that you go to the pub and have 4 pints of beer, basically. And I mean, I have nothing against drinking in small moderation, but again, that will just lead to more stress. It will lead to more illness, and that's obviously doesn't lead to flourishing.
I like what you said there just now. In the black community, we would call that a bar, because it's a poetry.
Yeah.
So, but what you just said was I do a few things in great depth, and that is really really key because a lot of people do a lot of things shallowly, and it
Mm.
leads to just a perpetual cycle of being on the hamster wheel of looking for that next dopamine hit. So when the coworker said that, I was like, oh yeah, well, it makes sense that she's just kind of on that looking for the next rush, looking for the next, hit of dopamine. That's all ego. That's all the ego. That's all the ego wants is that next rush, that next hit of dopamine. It doesn't want to settle. It doesn't want to sit down. It doesn't want to release and feel a lot of the things that these people have been running from all the
Mm.
time, every single day. So yeah. I have a very slow lifestyle myself as well. I very much enjoy it. I very much like being outside in nature. I am, I use technology when I have to, but I realize that it's the longer I use it, the more it stressed me out because
Mm.
it's just not it's so unnatural for us to be interfacing with technology as much as we do. We should be interfacing with each other. We should be building community. We should be, helping each other grow and stuff. But, technology has helped us communicate, but it also has drastically distracted us from the inner work, you know
Mm.
and it's so easy for us to do the inner work and then get distracted and fall back into ego and just drop everything that we've just learned because technology reinforces ego so very much. We have our own Instagram page, we have our own this page, that page. This is identity left and right, so these things reinforce what your personal sense of self is. But
Mm. And we kind
yeah.
of, with the kind of social structure that we have in place right now, it forces us to do that, right? Like
Exactly.
me being sort of a solo entrepreneur,
Yeah.
like it forces me to post on Instagram and promote my uniqueness, because that's what people are looking for. But I do think there is a way to do that authentically, right? Or at least do it as authentic as humanly possible. I follow
Yeah.
this. There's a really amazing business coach. He calls himself an authentic business coach, but I think the ways in which that he does it is very authentic. It's very sort of aligned with spirituality and promoting your authenticity, but not doing it in such a way that becomes incredibly like salesy and stuff. So,
Right.
but I agree with you. I think social media, oh, it does bring out the worst in people sometimes.
Yeah. Because it feeds the ego.
Yeah.
We get a notification, like, oh, I'm important, let me see what this is. We get a DM, oh, it's a perpetual cycle of feeding that sense of self. And
Mm.
that's why I'm always preaching to people to just take time, like, or at least like monitor your screen time.
Hmm.
I do a screen time monitor with my siblings, maybe every other week or so. Just kind of like I'll tell them to send me your screen time, and if it says like 8 hours, I'm like, no. I'm like, no, you need to do better, sister. You need to do better. She's like,
I
I
love
know.
that. I love that you keep each other accountable. That's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because because it helps keep you accountable as well,
Hmm.
And as you get older, you know, when you think about the histories, civilization, the role of the elder was someone who is experienced and wise. So I still think about that culturally today, even though in America it's very solo. It's a very
Mm.
wolf, not wolf, but like very, just egoic way of living. You're just kind of focused on you, and you're just trying to get. It's very competitive,
Hmm.
and in past civilizations with culture, it was much more family oriented. Like the elders bestowed information and knowledge towards the younger people. So I kind of treat myself in that way that Once I'm 50 and stuff, I would like to be in a position in which I have enough knowledge to bestow to people to help enrich their
Mm,
lives. And if you're not doing the work now, when you get to that age, you're gonna be just like how you were when you were 20 years old. You don't really
mm.
have much because you haven't been doing the work, and the work is very difficult. It's very hard, but I mean, if you don't rush it, you take it slowly, you do it a little, just meditate once a day, and you do that over time. Time is a compounding vehicle, so an action taken today is worth more 10, 20 times more in the future. So I think people vastly underestimate how important just doing a little small task once a day. 15 minutes of
Mm,
meditation once a day could probably change your life in 5 years, or even
mm.
less, even a year. It could change your life. But
I
yeah, go
want to
ahead.
touch on something you said there, which I think is such an interesting archetype, which is the archetype of the elder. I suppose it is in many ways a lost archetype, you know?
Yeah.
And I think maybe a lot of people will be, well, maybe obviously not within our space, but within other spaces, they may be put off by the language of an elder. Maybe there's a more modern word to be, I mean, it's role model, like it's like role modeling, right? In many
Yeah,
ways,
essentially.
essentially role modeling. And I think a lot of people have lost their sense of being a mentor, a coach, a role model, an elder for the people who are younger than themselves or even older than themselves, and the potential healing and positive impact that that can have on the world. And just reflecting upon, or like, that sounds like that's a part of your identity, right? Being an elder for your being, and that then that contributes to you doing certain behaviors. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. It's the archetype that I've taken on in many lifetimes. So
Yeah.
it just feels natural to me to re, get back into that role. Um, Once I've done the inner work to like realize that cellular memory of those lifetimes of being
Yeah,
that
yeah.
person, of helping those people, then it's just natural to just evolve back into that person because we need people in those positions to help guide people in the right direction. And as society is currently, we have people in power who have massive amounts of wealth, who are influencing people in the wrong direction. They're
Yeah.
not incentivized to help you grow because they need, it's just a mechanical system. It's they need cogs in the machine. So you don't go to school to learn how to live a good life. You go to school mostly to learn how to work inside of a company to be the cog in a machine. you know so we need people to remind people of what it means to live a life, a fulfilled life in which your fulfillment is coming from your inner self, not from the outer world.
Hmm. So how do you? I know I'm asking you questions. I think it's sometimes. I mean, we can sometimes, I suppose. How do you remind yourself to embody the archetype of the elder? And there's a follow-up question, which is, we were talking a bit about identity and having an identity that is, I suppose, expansive. So yeah, I suppose there's two questions, like how do you remind yourself to embody the archetype of the elder, and is there a pitfall that's limiting somehow? Is it? I don't know. It's just a question that came to me as we were talking.
Of course. I I I feel like I naturally push myself in that direction because I think I just, that's the frequency that my soul vibrates at. I'm someone who's constantly pushing themselves to be better and do better, and
Mm,
therefore I think by maintaining the frequency of self development, I think it comes through that my authenticity is in which the things that I say, because perhaps I show a lot of my life online so you can see that I'm doing the work. So, for instance, in 2019, I did a 30-day fast in
mm,
which I didn't consume any like I didn't really eat any food. And that's something that not a lot of people would even do or even think of doing. But I push myself constantly to do those things. Most people will never do like ayahuasca and stuff because it's too scary. It's too intense. And I agree,
Mm,
it's intense. People should not do that unless they're ready to do it. But because I'm so dedicated towards being a better person, because I have this deep reverence and love for all of creation, I see myself as someone who has to do this so I can help others. And
mm,
me not working on myself is me not helping other people. And it really takes just one person to change a storyline of a collective of people. I mean, a lot of the spiritual teachers, like Jesus, as they call him, or the Buddha, these were just one person, but it changed the planet collectively
mm,
as a whole. So, I feel like people vastly underestimate their own power and their ability to influence people in a positive direction.
mm,
And if you continue to work on yourself, you can continue to influence people for the better. People just need direction and how to live. And if I've already made all the mistakes, if I've already accumulated all of the traumas that most people will experience, I've been through a lot of awful crap in my life. So I have the range of pain to connect with people in different ways. And I
mm.
understand what they're feeling, and I understand why they want to run from what they're feeling. But surrendering is the only way to heal. So it's, I forgot what the second question is. I feel like I
The
kind of went
second
on a
question is,
tangent.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a beautiful. I read this post on Instagram the other day, which said something such as, Jesus only had 12 disciples, or something like that. That was the sort of ripple effect, basically,
Right.
which speaks to exactly what you just said. My second question was: is there a potential pitfall in the sense of being an expansive being to hold a particular archetype like an elder? Like, does that limit the potential expansion of your identity? I don't know if that question makes sense. Just
Yes,
sort of,
yes. I want to answer that question in two ways. One, I believe, because I when I hear that question, I kind of perceive of it in two different ways.
sure.
One is the expansiveness aspect, and I think the drawback from what I've experienced is that once you step into a new personality in which your awareness is about when your personality is about having more awareness, you start to have more awareness over everything. And
Mm,
that I feel like a lot of people enjoy kind of being an ego, because then you can have this negligence and that you're just still, oh, I'm still learning. It's okay if I go to the bar tonight. It's a Monday and I have to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, but it's okay. I can go do shots of tequila. It's fine. It's comfortable being in that state, because you can just kind of just push it off and say that whatever. But once you start to have awareness over yourself and your actions, now you have this accountability, because once
mm,
you're awake, it's hard to fall back asleep. Once you're awake to a certain level, it's hard to fall back asleep. And that can feel, I don't know, it can feel emotionally difficult
mhm,
to experience that level of awareness. And the elder aspect of it can be also difficult as well, because doing the work is hard. It's
mhm,
exhausting. Most people don't want to do it. Most people don't want to do shadow work. Most people don't want to do the stuff that you have to do to be a better person. But
mm,
the things that you refuse to do are the things that make you better. On the other side of fear is exactly what you're looking for. And surrendering is part of the process. Surrendering is how you take the path of least resistance to get
mm,
to that other place that you're looking for on the other side of the bridge. We are used to making a way for ourselves through ego. Our ego wants to control so much of life and reality, but surrendering is the path of least resistance. And surrendering just means that you're kind of going with the flow of what's already happening in life. And sometimes it's going to require you to do things that your ego might not want to do or feel like doing. But on the other side of doing that action is a life full of abundance and joy and love that's just
Mm,
everlasting. So it's tough doing it, but I can think of no more of a fulfilling life than a life
mm,
full of surrendering to the inner God inside of you.
mm. Isn't it Socrates who said, an unexamined life is not worth living?
I think it is Socrates. It's
It
either
is
Socrates
Socrates,
or
but I might
Aristotle.
be paraphrasing. I might be saying it wrong, but it's that's the
It's
gist.
very accurate, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that is the
But
gist. Yeah,
it's true, yeah, it's true.
it
I
is
agree with
true.
it. Yeah,
The thing though is
yeah,
like it's so much easier, like you've just been sort of alluding to, is that it's so much easier to, yeah, go to the pub and talk about shallow stuff for 3 hours over sort of
yeah,
sitting with yourself and being like, okay, what is going on here and what changes do I need to make to my life to make it better?
yeah, exactly. Which usually requires feeling some uncomfortable emotions.
Yeah,
But if you don't feel them, they're gonna stay there forever. So
yeah,
so the saying "you have to feel to heal" is 100% true because you do.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah,
also it's just like, it's easier to numb yourself than taking really, let's say you hate, like let's say you work in a corporation that you hate, but the way that you manage yourself through that is that you go out drinking with your friends every day, right? Instead of quitting the job, instead of finding a different place to work where you would feel more fulfilled,
right,
instead of going
right.
home and like making a plan, like doing the hard work of figuring out why do I not like this job and what do I need to make a change and what do I need to change within myself to maybe even like the job that you're in, and sort of do all of that work to, yeah, become a better person, which is what we've been talking about throughout this entire episode.
Which is why I kind of do my best to maintain like just an open heart for people because life
Hmm.
is difficult, it's hard.
Mm,
Like if you feel like the best solution is to go to the pub and just take shots because your job and your life is so stressful, by all means, do what you have to do. I still hold a place of love for you. I've
absolutely.
been in a space where I've had addictions and stuff like that where I had to have these coping mechanisms because I didn't have the inner strength to deal with those things and work through those things. So I understand it completely, you
Mm,
know. I feel like if I had a mentor or someone to guide me or an elder to help guide me, I wouldn't have had to experience half of the things that I've been through. But
mm.
we don't live in a civilization like that. It's very competitive. It's very, selfish and egoic. And that's just kind of what I observe on this planet. We have a deficit of love. It's so funny that once you do the inner work, love is everywhere. It's abundant. But once you look out into the world and see how we live and see how we treat each other, it seems like there's a deficit of love and care and compassion for our fellow man or human being, to say.
And the funny thing is, though, and I mean, I don't know the kind of work that you do outside of this podcast, but I work quite a bit in like the sort of spiritual industry in London. Like I work at a few different studios, like I'm quite sort of in the spiritual industry. And even within that, there is
Yeah,
a ton of competitiveness.
it
Like
is.
a ton.
Yeah,
Like dog eat dog. People are sort of and it's a funny one because living in London is expensive, right? You
right, right.
need to get the jobs to pay the bills, and I think that it is a really really hard thing to reconcile or like create some sort of bridge or marry that to be and I mean I think I do it quite well. Like I don't engage in that competitiveness. If
Yeah,
a job comes my way and I'm like, I don't think that's right for me, I send it off to a friend. Like, and I think that always come in return, like I always believe that I'll be given what I need in that moment. Like that trust is totally within me.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but it is really, really hard when you live in a place like London, which is super expensive. You have to
Yeah,
pay the bills, like you have to pay for food, right?
exactly.
So I think a lot of like it's unfortunate because I do think a lot of that competitiveness is actually rooted in that, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the two bottom
Mm,
needs aren't actually covered, but the flip side is you see celebrities, politicians, whatever, who have everything and are still incredibly ego, right? So that it doesn't mean that having everything or having the basic needs covered takes out the ego, but I wonder if that's a part of that root is that you feel like to have the bottom needs covered, you need to
yeah.
like hustle for it basically.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think it's twofold, well, two-part, if you will. I think capitalism naturally makes us compete with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's this, it's really just the haves and the haves not, and the people who start to have, they start to have more and more and more, and then you start to get the billionaires who have so much, and then the people at the bottom who have so little. So naturally, it's very competitive. It's not, it's not really centered around sharing, sharing everything. And twofold, I think that that people are really stuck in those lower levels of survival, and
Mm,
even when they start to have, they start to want more, so that makes them even
mm,
more competitive, and they start to exist in this state of either greed or scarcity, in
mm-hmm,
which I know I have $1 million in my bank account, but I want $2 million because I just need it. Or I have $1 million in my bank account and I only made, $2,000 this month. Oh my God, what if I go broke? So
mm,
scarcity kicks in. So it's just
mm.
like there's just so many things in which it creates this competitiveness that just makes us naturally against one another. When I certainly don't have the answer towards that issue. I definitely don't, but I always think about, well, what if we didn't have the systems in place? Like, what if we had something else that, it's just based around sharing, and if all of our needs were met and we didn't have to work, to make money, I feel like we would be a completely different civilization. I mean, we would probably have, no crime, no violence, no killing. Everyone has this love in their heart and this deep affection for other people, and yeah, it would be, we would be a different type of human being.
I strongly agree. We would definitely be a different, very, very different human being. I mean, I suppose there's some people who would argue that we are, natural killers, basically, from like the tribal sort of being cavemen and women, basically.
Right.
But I do strongly believe that through education and through learning and having, like you've been talking about, strong elders who talk about right and wrong, that we could find our way through that. I think we could find our recondition our natural instincts, basically.
Yeah, I agree. And I think during that time period we were probably natural killers, but that was our environment. That's what we
Yeah,
had to be. But like we don't have that now. So
we don't need to do that anymore. It's over.
exactly.
It's done.
Yeah, and I think the people who want to maintain the current structure that we have with capitalism and everything else, they have no incentive to want to change because they're winners in life. They have all
Mm,
their needs met. They have so much wealth and money. They have so much power and influence over others. Why would they? Why would their ego want something different that benefits the whole? Why would they?
mm,
But I feel like the natural course of evolution, if you look throughout history, all of the monetary systems eventually failed. So why would this
mm,
one be any different? It's because it's not sustainable, because it's not built on equality. It's not built on I have and you have too.
mm. I've been listening to a lot of history books on like the end of empires. So like the end of the Roman empires and other empires
Exactly.
that's come and gone through history, and it's really interesting to think about. I suppose at the moment we have like a world empire. I don't know, and it will be really really interesting to see if, like, will this come to an end, and how will that be, and what comes after it, and what are sort of the steps to get there. Like, it's a really, what do you think, what are your thoughts?
I find it interesting as well because I mean throughout history we've never had technology like the way that we do now. You
Mm,
know, like the internet and all this tech that we have is vastly different. We never had AI. We never had the ability to manipulate people's perception of reality in the way that we do now, which is quite honestly sometimes scary because most people are conditioned and trained through social media. So, you know, with AI, you can literally just make a fake video and it'll go viral because people think it's real.
mm,
That's happened a few times where something completely fabricated went viral and that's not real. And if
mm,
this is just the beginning stages of AI, what's going to happen in the future? Are we eventually going to have like holograms, like where it's actually 3D projected into our reality? It's no longer on our phone in a video form. Like we actually, there's the ability to stage things outside of us that looks real, but it's completely fabricated. I'm definitely concerned with the level of control that these world governments and world organizations have over the population. I'm definitely concerned, but in my heart, I know no matter what is going on, love will prevail.
mm,
It's just a matter of time. Like
mm,
people don't like to be suppressed. People don't like to be lied to. People just have been so disempowered that they feel like, what's the point? They become apathetic, or what? I forgot what the word is.
apathetic,
Apathy. Yeah,
apathy,
they
yeah.
yeah, they're just like, what's the point? You know, and I completely get that, you know, like the power that a billionaire has versus someone with no money, it might seem vast, but that's just one dimension. That's just one level of influence that they have. If there's a bunch of people with no money, but yet they work together, like if collectively the people just say, you know what, I'm just gonna stop working, this structure that we have is gone overnight. It will collapse because it's built off of productivity, and people are
Mm,
only productive because they need money. But
mm,
if things are continually get harder and harder and harder, they're eventually just going to stop working because it's not feasible.
mm.
So the people will always be stronger than that small one percentage of people, but they have to be empowered to get to that level.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I agree with you. It's so dangerous to fall into a place of like cynicism. I
Yeah,
get really upset when I see cynicism in people, because I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I wish you could sort of keep the hope and keep the positivity. There's a really good book by Yuval Harari called Homo Deus, and in that book, he talks. Oh, what does he call it? He calls it dispensable people or something like that, like about AI, in the sense that how AI will like take over all the jobs, and eventually people will just feel worthless because they don't have anything to do, basically.
yeah,
Which is a really, also, like, it's a really sort of terrifying thought that, yeah, people won't have jobs, basically, and then how do you change it
yeah,
around? I mean, I enjoy working, but I also enjoy doing nothing at all,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and I think about that often. It's just like we spend so much time working and not enough time just being leisure, just doing
Yeah.
nothing. And you know, I look back and I used to be like a really bad workaholic because I had such a
Mm.
scarcity mindset. But it's just like after reading literally this book, The Surrender Experiment, I talk
Oh
about it
yeah.
all the time. I love this book because it will get you out of that scarcity mindset and to just surrender. Just surrender to the natural flow of life that's already existing. The universe wants you to be abundant. The universe loves you. It supports you, but you have to just surrender to the natural flow of life. And that is the path of least resistance. So if today, after I get done, if I just want to sunbathe, I should be able to do that. I should be able to relax. Now,
Mm.
most people, they probably can't do that because they have to work and stuff like that. And I think about that often, and I want that for everyone. I want everybody to just have that leisure time to just not have to worry about it. But the way society is set up, we don't have that unless you're rich already. And I'm not rich by any means. I'm not rich by any means, but I just I gave up the focus of money.
Me too.
I just gave it up. I'm like, it will come to me when I need it. And it
Yeah.
always has. It always has. So I was just like,
Mm.
where did I develop this scarcity mindset about money? Because it's always come to me exactly when I need it. Exactly when I need it. For instance, I need to get my a part of my roof repaired because it's leaking on a part of the roof. And I was really stressed about that. I'm like, man, this is gonna cost like $2,000 or something like that. And the mind is like, man, where am I gonna get this money from? Blah blah blah. And then my son was hanging out with one of our neighbors, and I was just kind of explaining to him what was happening. He's like, oh, I'll take care of that for you. What? Uh,
Awesome.
Great. I was like, I love that. He was like, yeah, I used to do roofing. Wonderful. And all I had to do was surrender.
Mm.
Just let go. Things will be taken care of when they need to.
Mm.
But our ego obsessed so much over control. It's so difficult to surrender and let go because it works on the unseen dimension, the unseen realm. It works on the levels that we can't see, but our eyes can only see such a small range of reality. Such a small range. You are cosmically blind towards the things that are outside of you. And I love that Joe Dispenza talks about this because he talks about the illusion of third dimensional reality in which, we have this illusion of separation, but it's only illusion because we are fooled by our senses. But we're all connected. We are deeply connected with all things, including the universe. And if
Mm.
we could see that, we probably treat each other so much differently. If I
We
saw,
would treat each other very differently. Yeah.
yeah, if I saw like a tether coming from my heart to yours, I'm like, okay, we're clearly connected.
Mm.
But it works on the unseen dimension, you know.
How old is your son?
My son's 10.
Nice. Becoming a teenager.
It's scary. It's scary. Every time I look at him, I'm like, you are getting taller and taller. He's definitely gonna be taller than me. I'm not very tall, but he's gonna be taller than me. So
So,
yeah,
like spirituality and parenting is really interesting.
it
Do you
is.
fi- do you find that your sense of spirituality is influencing the way that you're parenting your little dude?
I think so. Well, first off, he's having a significantly better childhood than me. Significantly. I mean, not experiencing all the traumas that I did when I was growing up. You're on the right track, my son. You are doing great. Two thumbs up. But I think so because I'm not really like obsessing over controlling him. I'm just letting him be him. He's also on the spectrum, so he has a bit of mild autism, but I'm not obsessing over controlling him, and I'm letting him figure things out for himself. I nurture him. He loves to play Roblox and create maps. He loves to um, he works on this program called Scratch, which was made by MIT, which helps people learn how to code. So it's more like a drag and drop coding kind of thing, but you still understand the basics of coding, and he loves to work with that. So I just nurture him. Whatever he wants to do, whatever he likes to do, I just nurture him and I let him do that. I don't force him to do anything. Like I had to go to church when I was younger, which being around a community is always a great thing, but I was always so very confused in which when I was going to church, I would see these people because there was two levels that people would go upstairs, praise God, and get deeply into spirituality, but then come downstairs. Sometimes they would argue. Sometimes I would hear people talking about each other behind their back.
Mm.
I knew some of these men personally, so I knew some of them were cheating on their wives, and I'm just
Mm.
like, I don't understand what's happening here. You guys say one thing upstairs and you come downstairs and you do a different thing. And then
Mm.
you go upstairs, you ask for forgiveness, and you come downstairs and you do the same thing that you just did yesterday over again. So it's just like, what are we actually doing here?
I mean, what is that? It's something I've pondered so many times because it's like so many religions talk about love and forgiveness and turning the cheek. and then you do the quite opposite. What even like how does like what is the split? Because it's like a split personality, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it really is. It's yeah, I don't understand it. African spirituality. I'm Nigerian, by the way. African spirituality is really interesting because they would often go upstairs and go into they call it going into spirit. And this is a really interesting thing, and there's actually documentaries about it. When they would go into spirit and they would start doing these chants in Yoruba. Our language is Yoruba, so they would go into spirit and they start saying these chants, and it was kind of like they were communicating with God. And my mom was actually like really, really, really good at this. They would call her in Yoruba they call it Woli or something like that. It means prophet. And my mom would give these prophecies from once she go into spirit and go into trance. She would give these prophecies of things that are about to happen. And one time she said that a church was about to burn down, one of the other churches, and it did. It caught fire. So it's really interesting to see those things when I was growing up, because I was like, what are they doing? And sometimes they would like just go into spirit, and they literally just they kind of like lose control of their body sometimes as well. Sometimes they would just kind of like fall down. Sometimes it was really interesting to be exposed to that. But yeah, yeah, I forgot
Yeah.
my point with that.
No. It's a friend talked to me, asked me about this recently, and I actually wrote something about it in my on my Instagram today, which is this thing is there's a huge difference between living and embodying spiritual values and being like a psychic medium clairvoyant, right? Because the thing
Right.
is, you don't have to have you don't have to embody and live your spiritual values to be a channel, to be a clairvoyant, to be a medium. You can be the most dreadful person you've ever met and be an excellent medium. It's a really fascinating thing, which is kind of the same thing, though, right? Is that you can
Yes.
go to church and sit there and be pious,
Yeah.
and then you can walk out and be a bitch.
Yeah.
Excuse my French, basically. Yes,
Yeah.
I don't know how that works because, yeah, I don't know how that works, but it certainly does happen quite a bit.
I think personally, from what I've read and researched, I think it works that way because humans are the ones who create morality. We are the ones who
Sure,
create good and evil, and the universe just sees things as experiences. The universe
sure.
loves everything collectively as one. So a bad person can could tap into this power, this wisdom, this knowledge, and use it for egoic purposes. But
Mm,
to the universe, it doesn't see polarity like that.
yeah,
It's just another aspect of self experiencing
yeah,
what it
yeah.
wants to. So when it comes down to the actions that are taken, a lot of the actions that are taken are from ego. But the power that you receive, the wisdom that you receive, the things that you tapped into, you're tapping into that unseen dimension. You're tapping into that infinite intelligence in the universe, and anybody can access that. I mean,
Mm,
if you look at World War II with Hitler, Hitler had the power to influence millions of people.
mm,
His charisma influenced millions of people to do absolutely awful things.
mm,
But he tapped into that power. He tapped into that ability and used it for nefarious things.
mm.
So, you know, and they used to they had something like that back in the day. I forget which time period this was, but they call that chaos magic, where
Sure.
they would they would use the power of the universe. They would sometimes create these sigils or use like obelisk or things. Perhaps they would use something like this, which is a pyramid. They would
Mm.
bestow their intent into it and then use it for whatever purpose, whatever selfish purpose that they have. But it's just that's a real thing. Like anyone can tap into the field and use it for whatever that they want to.
Totally valid point. I totally see what you mean, and I think that is absolutely right. Yeah. Hmm. You'd wish it was otherwise, but it just isn't, is it?
I know, right? But you know what? Those things help us grow.
True.
It help us grow, and you know, I've had so many guests on here who says the same thing. It has to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, we don't usually take action until things reach their breaking points.
Hmm.
We won't actually do something about global warming until Florida is underwater, and then we're like, okay, well, maybe there's actually some global warming. Well, yeah, maybe there is.
I mean, I live on an, I mean, although I live in the United Kingdom in theory is an island.
Right.
So, and I live relatively close to the Thames, which is like the river that flows through London. And at some point, I'm like, I probably have to move somewhere a bit higher up, you
Yes.
know. And there's a part of me
Yeah.
who's still thinking, oh, maybe I could get a flat down by the Thames. And when I think about what you just said, I was like, no,
Right.
no,
Yeah. And I think about that too because I had a remote viewer on this show, Stephen Schwartz, and
mm,
he had like thousands of people remote view the future, and they said that the sea levels rose, a
yeah,
lot of the coastal states were underwater, and a lot of people had to migrate, and people end up living a much more simplistic lifestyle because I
mm,
guess something happens with the grid, or like something happens with our technology or something like that.
yeah.
So
I mean,
I
I
often
mean
wonder
that's
like, why am I in the Midwest? Because it gets really freaking cold here. But then I think about that, and I'm like, maybe in the long run, this might be good for the future generations of, you
I
know,
think it might be. And I mean, because my spiritual teacher, she often says that kind of the prophecy or the message that she has received is that yes, we are at like the height of technology now,
right?
but it'll go back to like the basics basically because there's some sort of solar flare or something that knocks out the electricity
Yeah, I think
basically.
he said that. Yeah,
Yeah, that is
Earth.
the. I mean, who knows? But that is the prediction. But it definitely, certainly tells me that I need to live somewhere on a mountain where it sort of becomes temperate. I mean, I'm from Norway, but that's probably going to be absolutely freezing, isn't it? Because it's already cold during winter. So,
Yeah.
and if you don't have heating,
Well,
you don't want to be there.
I think it's
Yeah.
heating up though. Like if you think about it, for parts of the country to be underwater, that means that the polar ice caps have had to melt and the sea levels have had to rise. And in order for that to happen, the planet would have to heat up.
So
So
this is where my lack of science is going to come in. But I think certain parts of the world will become really hot, and other parts of the world will become really cold. Right? Isn't that the thing?
yeah, and he said like places like Arizona, there would be like a water shortage because it became so hot that there's no water there.
Wow.
So places that are hot now, they're gonna get even hotter,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and people are gonna have to move and migrate to get water and stuff. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, so that makes sense to me. You
It's
know,
going to
I
be really
don't.
interesting with America, though, right? Because, and I was thinking about, or I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about, because obviously you got the two coasts, right? And eventually, all of the people from those two coasts are going to have to migrate inwards, and the
Right,
ways in which that will change. Because obviously, it's my
exactly.
understanding. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like sort of the middle is much more Republican, and the coasts are much more
It's
Democratic.
um, it's kind of like all over the place,
Sure.
but from what, yeah, it's kind of like mixed because like if I recall correctly, some states like Florida are more Republican,
True.
Texas is more Republican, California is more Democrat, Illinois, where I live, is more Democrat. It just kind of depends on,
Sure.
yeah, yeah.
Just
It's
the
kind of like
setup.
all over the place. Yeah, it's a
But it
setup.
was talking about how that migration will obviously change all of that when climate change truly kicks
Exactly.
in.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. And
that's
I
gonna be fascinating.
think he said something about like there's gonna end up being like just one party or something like that. Like or I don't know if that I might be misquoting him. He might actually have said something different, but
That wouldn't be good though. That wouldn't be. That's dictatorship, right? That wouldn't be.
it can be.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. That's usually yeah, that's usually what happens.
It's usually bad.
But if you think about it, it would be for the best if it could be in a positive way, because then we wouldn't
Sure.
have duality, because
Sure.
duality is Republican and Democrat.
Yeah.
And if we want to live as one people, if we want to just be the people of Earth, then it would be one system.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
I
we are
agree.
so far away from that.
We
Jesus
are
Christ.
so far away from one system. Because there was one book I was reading by this economist, and she was talking about the benevolent dictator, basically. So you need to have like a benevolent leader, which is sort of, if you have a one-party star system, right? It would be like a
Yeah.
benevolent leader. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what she was talking about. Which obviously, I think the moment you use the word dictator, people are like,
I don't know
what
about
do you
that
mean, though?
one.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not an economist, so I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's an interesting point of view. I have no idea.
Which is why I like the Council of Elders, which is
Sure.
what Atlantis was, which is what they have in the we're getting a bit ET now, but the Pleiades, because they're when power is centralized to one individual,
Mm,
it's too much for that person, because
mm,
you control too much.
mm.
But if power is spread out over a group of individuals, well, those group of individuals can be corrupted, but your chances of corruption is much more less
Sure.
if the people have good intent. If they've done, like, if we get 12 people who have done the inner work, who've, you know, they understand that they are there for the people. They're not incentivized by money. So we couldn't exist in a system where monetary gain is there. That hypothetically could be a system in which a group of individuals make choices that could benefit the whole.
Mm.
But I mean, we're talking about a different type of human being, because
I mean,
yeah,
this is something else, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
I mean, that would be
truly,
so cool.
it would be, but
Yeah.
you know, we have some work to do to get to that level.
That is not where we are, basically.
It's not. It's where I hope
This
we
has
get to,
been
though.
this has been so fun. I have
Yes.
loved being on your podcast, Sage. I love entering into conversation with like-minded people around my age, who's actually really interesting. I love it so much.
Yes, I love it too. I feel like I've. This is the first time I feel like this was just like a conversation. Like I
Mm,
wasn't really interviewing, so
mm,
I'm curious to see how YouTube will react, because I typically don't like interviews where the interviewer is talking more than a guest. So I
sure.
tried my best not to do that, but this ended up just being a conversation.
The thing is,
So
I am also a natural interviewer
mm,
because I do a lot of podcasting myself, so I can't help myself.
yeah, I see you got the microphone. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, most people
I
don't.
can't help myself in like engaging the other person in conversation, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
I think
that's what it felt like.
it's just my natural temperament as well. It's just end up in like conversations. I just can't help myself.
Yeah, you're naturally inquisitive,
Mm,
as I am. So,
mm,
yeah. So that's just what we do.
mhm.
So, as we, get to the top of the hour, wrap up. These are the questions that I typically ask all of my guests.
Sure.
What is your definition of love?
Whew, that was an unexpected question. What is my definition of love? I'm gonna draw a parallel to something you said earlier, which I suppose is to embody the mindset that everyone is on their own spiritual journey, going through their own spiritual lesson, and from that place, if we can truly honor that, then, and to me, that mindset is love. Basically, to me, that mindset is love, to see that everybody is on their spiritual journey, and from that place, we have compassion, we have gratitude, and we have kindness, and yeah, that mindset is love.
That mindset is love. Beautiful. And lastly, what does the sun represent to you?
What does the sun represent to me? Well, I am a Leo by star sign, and I have a Henry Matisse hanging on my wall, which is called Icarus. And Icarus is, in the Greek mythology, one of the people who flew too close to the sun and burnt their wings, and unfortunately, as a part of the myth goes, dies. So I think the sun, to me, the sun is our life-giving force, but we have to treat it with a lot of respect. You know, you've used the word ego today, which I think is apt. It's that we have to treat our ego with awareness and respect and tenderness and care, because it can also burn you, basically. So it's just treating the sun with respect, I think, is what I want to say.
Yes, that was well spoken. Great. I agree. Wow. Tor, that has been absolutely amazing. Where can people find out more about you and reach out to you?
Sure. So you can find my Substack, which is torniamo.substack.com, my Instagram, which is just torniamo, and my website, which is torniamo.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, audience.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this show, I will be able to put Tor's information in the description box below. Drop a comment, drop a like, and we will see you all in the next one. Praise the sun.
Praise the sun. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.